Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Maybe Next Year, the only podcast that is still going. I think all the other podcasts have just quit at halftime.
Just take our word for it.
Yep. We are, we're the second longest running sad ass podcast full of sad sack dumbasses that keep watching this stupid fucking football team. My name is Frank.
I'm Scott.
I'm Paul. And even if the podcast, there might be one podcast that's still out there to talk about the one that ran longer than us. And there were a lot of F-bombs dropped on that podcast, which would be Bills and Beers this past week. And at one point, I forgot who it was saying, they always say got to have fucking faith in the team. I'm sick of this. And finally, Lars jumped in and said, enough with the F-bombs. I do not want to hear the word faith ever again on this podcast.
Yikes. And to be fair, like that's a Bills trigger word right now, right up there with like probably second only to process. The Buffalo Bills went down in what can only be described as horrifying fashion. I think the last time we talked, we weren't fully certain that Derek Anderson was going to be the quarterback. I think we believed it, but it hadn't been announced. And there was a certain amount of, they just got to look their usual, like,
I picked him to win.
You did? I think I did. I can't remember.
No,
I know
I was the only one.
Scott was the only one who had the F word, if you will, in their ability to win the game.
I had picked them to win the Texans, though, and I imagined it would be a Texans-like score. Yes. I did say my worry was that, like, passing could get away from the Bills if the Colts got going. But who could believe the Colts would get going when, they have a really good offense, but we have a really good defense. And as we know, a good defense is the most consistent thing in the NFL. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm analyzing 37-5, which was, as was pointed out, you never want to have the 5. Like 5 is never a good score. It means I think one of the radio guys said it's the perfect score to encapsulate. I couldn't do anything on offense basically all day, and the defense scored a little, but even that didn't really amount to anything. It
was a scoreigami, though, if you're familiar with that concept, which is a score that had never happened in NFL history.
Yes, that's true. This is the first time 37-5 has ever been posted as a NFL final score. But I mean, the Bills lose by 32. They do nothing with the ball. They cannot stop anything or anyone. Again, this was a 1-5 Colts team, which, it's not as if the Bills weren't a 2-4 football team that we should be looking so far down our noses at the Colts. But I think it's hard to imagine. I don't think anyone could have imagined that it was going to go quite like this. I gave up at halftime, so let's go with Scott, who probably watched the whole game on the back end there.
I did not make it through the whole game. I was watching on the Gamecast as usual on Sundays, and then I was marginally I was into it. I was like, hey, we're hanging around here. We're making some plays, and that first quarter wasn't terrible. The Colts obviously put together some runs and kind of got in the end zone at the end of the first quarter and the beginning of the second quarter, but they missed the extra point, and you're like, oh, that's probably a good sign. And then we go right down the field, and then I watched
this extra point.
I watched exactly. That's why we have the score we did. And then the Clay fumble, and a penalty here or there that didn't go our way, and suddenly there's a blown coverage on the check down from Luck to where Mac just kind of has to just, run at a decent pace, and he gets in from 30 yards on a check down. And in the end, I don't want to say the game's over, but we're looking at a 14-0 deficit on the road. And at that point, the team evidently decided to quit.
Yeah, they packed it in.
I don't think there's much else to say. It's frustrating. It's the second time that we've seen, I mean, maybe the third, depending on if you want to count the Chargers game as quitting. I mean, they obviously scored more in the Chargers game in the second half, but on some level, the quitting had already started in the first half there. The Ravens game obviously was them quitting. The Packers game, I felt like they tried to. I mean, that was a 2-score game for most of that game, so that was not quite as bad of a catastrophe. But this was, you know, if your team quits on you 3 times in the first 7 games, there's a problem there. And I will say, and this is something that, you know what, I'm not going to get into it right now. I'm going to let Paul go, and then I'm gonna talk to Frank about Josh Allen and Derek Anderson.
Oh, good. I think we should put that in the third topic of the
okay,
night.
Exactly. Perhaps we'll do that.
Yeah, you lose to the Colts by 32 points on the day, mind you, where Adam Vinatieri jumps the shark. Like, I think we all witnessed the end of Adam Vinatieri's career. They're going to let him get that record, and then he's gone. And you know, I really feel like if the people who are on the Titanic could have watched this game as the boat were going down, thinking, you know what, this is not so bad. This could be worse. We could be Bills fans watching this game. Boy, what a yeah. And Scott really did the progression well. It didn't start off the disaster. The defense came out with 2 good stops. They even stopped a 3rd and 1 QB sneak, which is not easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they seem to be on the right page. The offense moved the ball slightly, at least toward the midfield stripe at points early on. But then, yeah, you blow coverage here. You give up some big runs up the middle there. And then, as Scott noted, they just gave up. I think on Twitter during the game, I said that by the time it got to 17-0, or when it was 17-0, I said, I feel like this is over. I just don't feel that this team has the wherewithal to come back from this type of deficit, because they had shown so little on offense. And, you know, this was not you are not going to face many defenses that are worse than the Colts defense if you look at the amount of points that they've given up this year. And as far as the Bills defense goes, this was I think I read maybe the second game in the last few seasons where they had no sacks and no takeaways. You're not going to, as we've discovered with this team, you are not going to win unless you sack the quarterback and get takeaways. Now, some of that is what the Colts were doing. Some of that is Andrew Luck is a good quarterback. But a lot of it is, you know, undisciplined linebackers not staying on the spot on the field where they should be. It's guys like Dante Johnson deciding he's going to take a crazy angle on a play where he should be having outside contain, and the running back is like, thank you, and strolls in for a touchdown. That was in the Jacoby Brissett phase of the game. So at that point, everything was already said and done. But just to see and we'll get into this topic more later, I'm sure, in the, you know, what the F portion of this. But this is the 7th game in Sean McDermott's 23-24 game, you know, coaching history that the Bills have lost by 20 or more points. I mean, the blowout trend is disconcerting to say the least. So, you know, I don't really want to dig much deeper into the specifics of this game, but I'm sure I'll talk more about what the Bills siren is ugly game. The Bills siren has sounded.
Has sounded. So you have to wrap up your point. Thank you. No, I did not know that about McDermott, that he had given up that many, because that's not just an indictment of offense; it's an indictment of defense, because you have to give up at least 20 points to do that, and typically you're giving up more. And that's for a guy who's all about defense. And I think we've seen. You're right. This defense thrives on sacks and interceptions. They're not a impose their will defense. They're a opportunistic defense that, you know, plays the ball and wants to get the football. And, you know, that's part of the risk reward that happens. I think that for me, and I'm not the first person to say this, what's disconcerting is this is the first, second, third, fourth game out of 7 that was over at halftime, not counting Bills Vikings, which was over in the good way at halftime. And, you know, they've split the other 2, right? Like they won a close one and they lost a close one in the last 2 weeks. So it once again, it's not a sustainable way to win football games. I found his comments on Monday on the radio station particularly disconcerting, where he was doubling down and sort of facetiously saying, like, well, I'd love to score 50 points a game, but you know, hey, that's not realistic. And my philosophy is to establish the line of scrimmage and all that. And he just seems to be, I don't know where this comes from, you know, that people think that this is the way to win football games. I mean, even great defenses have good offenses. I don't think you need to have Tom Brady, but I think you do need to have something on the offensive side of the football. And so, to have them sort of just be blowing smoke up everyone's ass, pretending like this is a football team worth watching. And second of all, to hear him say the damn, he said it again, like, well, where we live, we've got to, here in Buffalo, we've got to run the ball and play blue collar football. Like, no, like that's like, first of all, Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady are waving hello from wintry tundra, as is Mitchell Trubisky. And the best Bills team in history wasn't really a running team. You had Thurman Thomas, who could run, but he was more of an option catching the ball and running. He was a versatile running back, and so they weren't a impose your will football team. They were a score a lot of freaking points team. It's very frustrating because really in the last 2 weeks, I've turned the corner on. I've gone from, thinking these guys could do something even though I didn't like them, to just, I don't think it's going to get done with these two guys, and they're not going anywhere this year, and
not going anywhere next year either.
No, they're not. I mean, between getting the playoffs and the fact that they're clearly like settled in for a rebuild, like this team is going to get rebuilt under them. And here we are again, 31 pass attempts for 175 yards for Derek Anderson, who, I don't know, might have gotten to 200 if he could have kept throwing. Andrew Luck gets 4 touchdown passes, like unmolested. They ran the ball too. The Bills did okay running the football. They averaged 7 or 8 yards a carry. They couldn't do anything else. Kelvin Benjamin showed up a little, and they just refused to sort of join the rest of that. That's the other thing that I think I really take away from this game is I tuned in for, I watched the highlights of the end of that Bears Patriots game, and I watched the Chiefs play football. And there's Pat Mahomes.
It's just like watching the Bills.
It's exactly like watching the Bills. Yeah. And you know what? I don't care. Derek Anderson can't do what Pat Mahomes can do with that offense, and neither can Nate Peterman, and neither can Josh Allen. And it's clear that not only that we missed Pat Mahomes, but more importantly, you watch that and it's like they're playing a different sport. They're like, the Bills are not playing what everybody else is playing. They're
just the good teams, though, Frank. That's the difference.
I don't understand, because like even the bad teams, like the Colts, seem to be like wouldn't you trade places with the Colts today if you could? Wouldn't you? I mean,
well, yeah, but that's true since basically Andrew Luck got drafted.
Exactly. That's my point, though. Like they definitely have their problems, and the Colts are not a good football team, but I would trade places with them in a heartbeat, because I think they're better built going forward to do the right things. So, I mean, it was just a nightmare all around. And losing McCoy, of course, is the cherry on top, because, now we're under the laughable proposition, which we'll get to at the end of the podcast of by the end of the week, I can't wait to hear how somebody's justifying how Derek Anderson and the team might be able to win a game against New England at home. And so I encourage, if you need a good laugh, to tune into One Bills Live at the end of this week on WGR and listen to what John Murphy and Steve Tasker come up with, because I'm sure it's going to be complete horse shit. Just literally, they're going to have a horse on the radio and they're going to back it up to the microphone, and it's going to poop on the microphone for 3 hours, and that's going to be their football preview.
To be fair, that was actually our first episode.
That was our first episode. Maybe next equine.
Then it would have to be your horse,
right? Thank you. Very well done, Tommy boy. Do you want to do 3 stars, or do you want to take me to task on some sort of Josh
no? I
Derek
think
Anderson thing?
It takes the fun out of it when Frank is like, "Oh, well, I give up on this team," because then it's like not. But I mean, to me, the thing is that I figure is there is the concept we've discussed occasionally on the show. It's obviously come from the baseball side of like a replacement level player.
Right.
That was literally what you saw on Sunday playing quarterback. was a replacement level quarterback. Is literally anyone who has a moderate understanding of the game of football, who was literally sitting on the couch 2 weeks ago and brought in to play a game on 10 days notice.
Right.
And was not significantly better than any of the quarterbacks who have played for the Bills so far this year.
But Sally was not.
I think it's a fair
worse.
I think it's a fair question to ask whether he was like. I mean, granted, he had 4 turnovers and he had a terrible day, but I mean, there's no doubt that he's better than Nathan Peterman. It's not that he's good by any stretch. It's just
and that's
Nathan
not what
Peterman
I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, and that's the point. Is like a replacement level player is someone who is available at a moment's notice because they're not that good. Like,
right.
The average quarterbacks are all snapped up in this league. Like,
yes.
You have to kind of find a bad one if you want a guy who's available right now.
Well, there is a guy who's played for San Francisco, but that's another topic.
That's
and he's been out of the league long enough that maybe his rust would really show. Like even not that anyway. Yes, but let's leave him.
I mean, someone was saying that Derek Anderson is
the NFL. Let's just leave it.
Like the NFL, we're just not going to acknowledge that's a thing that exists as a problem in society and the league.
Exactly. Well, someone was saying it was either Anderson had started 4 games in the last 7 years or 7 games in the last 4 years.
Neither one's good.
Neither one of those is good. But that's kind of the scary thing is, of course, is that, and again, Josh Allen is young. He is getting better. I think he's slowly, maybe tinily getting better at various points. You can maybe see it, obviously, before he was injured. He's not getting better right now because he can't do anything other than take.
He might be getting better because he physically is getting healing. So
exactly in a day-to-day fashion, yes,
right.
he's recovering back at the bar, and he needs to wait 3 turns for his health powers to heal up. But anyway, so Derek Anderson again shouldn't be the bar that we are trying to get over.
No. I agree, yes.
But that is now we can go back and say, look, if Josh Allen can't be better than what we're seeing from Derek Anderson on 10 days notice, like this game, then we don't have a quarterback. Like that is the bar that he now has to get a crop of. And I don't know if I want to say that he needs to be able to get over that bar by the end of this year, but it damn well better be in the first 4 games next year. Otherwise, let's just shut this whole thing down. Like hello 2020. Like
I can agree. I think I can agree to that. By the beginning of next year, you're not impressed with Allen because presumably also at the beginning of next year we would have additional offensive football players.
Yes, exactly.
With which to make some rain. And so if you can't get on the page by then, well, I'm with you. Let's move on.org. Okay.
That's all. I can go on to 3 stars if you'd like.
I think you should, because then we can really get into like whatever terrible thing the next segment will be whatever terrible thing you want to say about the Bills or the front office or the football team, you can. That's
screaming into the microphone.
Yes, it's just going to be anger. So let's do 3 stars and acknowledge the good players of the football game.
What was the thing from Unfiltered Hate? I forget what it is. Anyway, so let's talk 3 stars. Honorable mentions. I guess I will give it to, I don't know. I guess I'll say
it's tough to choose a Bill if that's what you're trying to do. I mean, you could be here for a while.
That's not really what I'm thinking. I'm trying to think.
Eric Anderson, just for even able to
for being a good sport. And
did you see his face? That screen capture of his face in the press conference, the 1,000-yard stare. Oh man, it's like he looked like he regretted coming back. Anyway,
and I, as you know, did retweet that with the pretty much the conversation between Lando Calrissian and Darth Vader.
Yes,
you're coming to mentor the QBs. Great, I'll sign here. And then you're starting next week. This isn't this was never part of the deal. You know the rest.
The deal change. So you pray that I don't change it any further.
Exactly.
So I will say that I will give no one an honorable mention just because, like, I was debating whether to give it to a Colts defender.
There was no honor in this game.
Yeah, exactly. Like a Colts defender, maybe, but yeah, not even really. I mean, so anyway, I give it to Anthony Costanzo for your 3rd star. the left tackle for the Colts, who successfully defeated Jerry Hughes on numerous occasions. Jerry Hughes, I believe, who now owns an unsportsmanlike penalty on an extra point, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I figure if you're, he hadn't had a personal foul all season. So when you get it, go for the gusto and do it on an extra point. That's what I say. He was way behind his usual pace, so let's do it in a unique fashion.
Then I have to pick it up somehow. And yeah, exactly. I think it's not a full Jerry Hughes until he gets a sack and takes a swing at a guy at the same time. But anyway,
the old sack and swing, as they call it.
Yeah,
much different than swinging your sack.
One of those things. So your second star goes to Mr. Andrew Luck, who relatively, I'll call it a game manager type performance. 156 yards passing is what I see here. I see only 17 completions. That's not making me really that happy. Yes, he had 4 touchdowns. I suppose that's pretty good. Yes, his QBR was 93.7, which is like 6.3 off the max it could be. Yes, he was pretty much not even trying after the second half. But yeah, so that's why he doesn't get the first star, because the Bills just couldn't make it a good enough game to get him the first star, because I'm pretty sure he would have gotten there. And then your first star, I'm going to give it to Marlon Mack. Obviously, there were other running backs did just as well, but Mack obviously had if you do the carries and receptions, he had 21 touches for 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a pretty good day for the office for anybody. And again, some of it is the Bills' defensive line clearly not really coming to play. Some of it is the linebackers not really being in the area code on some of these plays. But he was running hard, and he definitely gave a good solid effort. Another nameless running back who finds a way to destroy the Bills. Good pickup in your fantasy league this week. Good one to keep an eye on is anybody playing the Bills for your fantasy league. That's your fantasy tip of the week.
Huzzah. I think when you enter, and I just tweeted this because I think it's funny. I think when you enter New Era Field, you should have to enter through the center gate, and above the gate should be the words "Abeandon All Hope, ye who enter here."
I like it. I like it.
Until Brandon Beane is, well, I guess I still can't really decide that I hate him, but I'm way over Sean McDermott now. I'm done.
The magic's gone.
The magic's gone. I think his true abilities are showing here in a crisis. And one of the things that really bugged me, and then someone else we can have another moment, that he said was, the guys prepared really hard all week, and we tried, they were pressing him like, how can you possibly justify this type of losing? And he's like, well, was it a lack of preparation, or, and he goes, no, like we prepared all week. And this type of thing always reminds me, I may have said this on the podcast before. I had a professor in law school who said he was a good guy. And after I wasn't in his class anymore and I would help him with projects and stuff, I went up to his office and he said, I can't meet with you today. Today's the day that the first years who failed their test, or got a bad grade, come up to see me. He goes, and I hate this day. And I go, yeah, it's got to be just sort of a lot of, he goes, the problem is every one of them comes in here and says, but I studied so hard for this test. And he says, if I take you at face value that you studied really hard for this test, I am left to conclude you are stupid.
Right. Or just not lawyer material. One or the other.
You don't know how to study at minimum.
Right. Like, in short, you're bad at this. And so if McDermott feels, and if the team he is correct even that the team prepared all week for this, then I am left to conclude that the team is bad, because it is not a matter of wanting it more or who prepares the most. Okay. It's a matter of talent. And then maybe after you equalize for talent, there's some room for preparation to make difference at the margins. But, if you are telling that, to me, this needs to be the follow-up question, right? Like, okay, well, if they prepared very well, then are you saying that they're simply not talented enough? What happened today? Because it's not simply good enough to say the 1-5 Colts are also in the NFL and they play football too. That might work the first or the second time, but as Paul pointed out, they've been blown out by 20 points 7 times already in less than 2 years. So What the high holy hell? Paul, why don't you?
Yeah, it's a continuation of the rant. I was just reflecting on our right before the season podcast, and we all predicted that this team would be either 5-11 or 4-12. That said, we knew this year was going to be painful. It would involve some level of suffering, as former Buffalo Sabres general manager Darcy Regier would say. And yet none of us at the time really expressed, pressing doubts about McDermott, or said if they finished with a bad record, he should be gone. That was not the conclusion we reached. So they're probably on pace to finish 4-12, 5-11 anyway. So really, why are we frustrated with him now? And what I'm going to, note is, to use his own words against him earlier in the season when he talked about some of the offense's struggles. He said, you expect the team to be hitting certain benchmarks performance-wise. You expect to see progress. Instead, what we've seen is they've at best stagnated and possibly even regressed on offense, to the point where if they get a 100-yard rusher at this point, I'd be like, wow, what a phenomenal rushing day. Like now, Chris Ivory, 16 for 81 seems phenomenal to me. And a passer, I think Allen broke 200 in the Chargers game and would have broken in the Vikings game if they'd had to actually pass in the second half. But that's 2 games out of 7 where my standard is like, oh, maybe I'll pass for over 200. Like Mahomes, Roethlisberger, Brady. I've watched games this year where those guys have hit 200 in the first half with no problem. And this offense just cannot do anything to move the ball, to get into scoring position. And, I was looking, yes, they're a young team. I looked at some stats today. Buffalo ranks 3rd in terms of percentage of snaps played by either first or second-year players. 34.1% of their snaps have been by rookies or sophomores. So even though the roster age is technically older, the young guys are the ones getting the playing time. The old guys, the Ramon Humbers and the Andre Holmeses, et cetera, tend to be depth guys or guys who are playing a lot of special teams. And, you have some positives in there. Deion Dawkins ranks, 22nd out of 118 offensive tackles, and 14th in pass blocking from Pro Football Focus, which, even if you don't think that's the be-all end-all resource, and you shouldn't, they're not so far off that Dawkins is doing badly. And yet then you look at one other thing I read on PFF. Nate Peterman, his ranks 56th out of 56 quarterbacks who've seen at least 100 snaps since the start of the 2017 season in terms of overall grade. Blaine Gabbert, who's second last, is nearly 20 points ahead of Peterman in their rankings. And I bring up Nathan Peterman because he has been played a direct role in 2 of the 2 of the 5 soon-to-be 6 losses the Bills have had to this point in time. So, the frustration I think that comes from me is I am not shocked they are 2-5. A little disappointed. Think they should be 3-4 or so at this point based on what we've seen. But they also beat the Vikings, which only them and the undefeated Rams have done. So I guess I shouldn't be too hoping for a better record on that front. But what's disappointing is the fact that we've not seen progress. If they had turned the ball over 3 times and lost 28-17 this game, we'd be like, boy, that's disappointing. Colts team's a team you should beat. Here's some offensive progress. Here's where they came up short. But it wasn't even a football game. And we've seen this so often with these 20-plus point losses, and it's just incredibly frustrating. When they go out on Monday night against the Patriots, I've never believed in moral victories in the NFL, but this will be one of theirs. It's like, well, they played it tight. I may actually be happy with that, with losing to the Patriots in front of a national audience, if they just don't embarrass themselves. And that is not a good place to be at.
Progress would be, progress is nice. Progress is one of those things that you're kind of expecting. I mean, I get, McDermott, has said repeatedly that, in the offseason, he was saying, well, every year is really different. You kind of have to take it as a step one. But, this team is not even making progress. It's not even like you'll expect that a team necessarily gets better year to year. They have to get better in the season, or at least more coherent, short of, the team, and I guess short of the team, having massive injuries or cuts or trades or anything like that. And obviously we have had some injuries, but I don't want to completely forget, obviously McCoy been out for some of this, and Allen, and some of this going on. But at the same time, I think you can say that and I think what McDermott would say was, well, you know, I'm sure we are having progress. You know, I think we are getting better. You know, I think we're running the ball better. We know the team better, whatever it is. But the problem is that, like, that's great. Everyone else in the league is also getting better every week. Also, everyone else in the league is also understanding their offense better, understanding their players better, figuring out what works, what matchups they like, where they've got advantages. All those things are also happening, and you are not running a race independently as much as we'd like, as much as coach speak tells you, like, we just have to worry about ourselves, yada, yada, yada. I understand, like, that's the message you want to send to your team, but at the same time, you must know that, no, you're actually in a competition every week. You play one on Sunday, and then you find out if you're actually better than the team you're playing that day. So that's frustrating. The other thing I will say is, to get back to Frank's points about kind of the frustrating things about kind of coach speak and stuff, is like, if you want to get him in the room, you want to ask him, if I was to suggest that this team isn't getting better, that this team is bad, that this team has given up, and that this team has no capability of making the postseason, what would you point to prove me wrong? How would you prove that wasn't an accurate statement? And I think they'd start with the Vikings game, and I'd be like, great, that's one. And then after that, I think they'd probably point to the Titans game, the other game they won, and be like, okay, so the game in which we had 220 total yards at home against a fairly average AFC South team, that's point two. And then everything else has been pretty much you being garbage.
I think you'd also get a healthy, you know, well, that's for you to decide, and we're not here to prove things to you. But I think he has said as much to reporters. So
yeah, and that's fine if that's how he wants to treat the media and the fans. Like, that's certainly the way to do it. Again, I'm not sure that being nice to the media and the fans will buy you any extra good graces when it comes down to, like, your team being terrible, but it probably couldn't hurt.
I think there's just room to say something like, yeah, we played really poorly. Obviously something is not, you know, and say, like, you know, I thought we had prepared well enough, but obviously we hadn't, because X, Y, and Z, you know, we went through, and maybe we need to adjust something, or, you know, there are players on this team that need to pick it up. And you can say something like that without having to name a player, and make it clear that you understand the gravity of the situation. And that is at least makes me feel like you're not insulting my intelligence, right? Because, like, if you're just going to parrot things, then why am I tuning in?
There's also a bit of accountability of it too. Like, I understand, like, he may not want to call people out in the media or in public.
Sure.
But on some level, it's, if you're not willing to show yourself accountable to the people who are the paying customers, then I don't know how you're supposed to encourage accountability to those same paying, to your players, to those same paying customers. Like, if I can't be honest and straightforward with them, I don't understand how I can expect my players to go out and try hard. I mean, admittedly, other than the millions of dollars that they're being paid. So I think I understand where he's coming from, but I would say that, and this is something we'll get to a bit later when we get to trade rumors, is, like, the culture at some point of accountability, or, like, team first, and things don't leave the locker room. You know, those things have problems and negative externalities as well. They are not universal goods, and you can't just say, like, well, we're keeping things in house, and have that be the answer to the problem of how you deal with the media, and expect there to be no pushback, or no that's all you need to worry about to a certain extent.
Anybody else we want to complain about? I mean, it seems like the wrong week to complain about quarterbacks, only because, like, obviously it is just whatever it is at this point. A lot of the reason I gave up on this season too, this game was the last chance for Josh Allen to come back to something that was a semblance of a team that was in the mix or had something to play for. Right, like, that's why I was invested in this game, and
right, because now they're going to be surely 2-6 after this coming week, and they're not going to run the table or go 7-1 in the back.
No, they're going to get trashed by the Bears, and by the time he comes back, they're going to be, you know, they would have to run the table to be 9-7, right? And that's just not going to happen. And so, for me, like, this was the last chance for the Bills season to be at all interesting except for anything that Josh Allen does. And so now really like as I texted the guys this week, we could watch the football game or we could come over and play Dungeons and Dragons and pretend we played the football game. And Scott had a great idea, which maybe we'll get to. I don't know.
Maybe we could save it. We could save it for the offseason too.
Yeah, that's a good offseason talk. It's certainly
Yes.
it's certainly got a chance to be a really good wacky schedule thing next year.
Yeah.
Let's see. What can I see? What things did the people say on the interwebs for us this week? You can always find us twitter.com/BBillsMNY, where Paul is there during the game and I am there after the game, generally drinking wine and angry.
Mad online.
Yeah, if you find that the tweet is extremely angry and not particularly well worded, it's probably me.
I was thinking we could go with the old Facebook system, putting our names in parens when it's not, one of us. But it's also fun to wake up in the morning and be like, who's replying to me on this? I didn't say this. And they're like, oh, Frank got a hold of the Twitter. But that always makes life entertaining.
When did Shermer oh, you answered Orlando's question. Okay. Our first question comes from the longest running Bills podcast on the air. Yeah. Bills and Beers, or Bills and Fears.
Fears, yes. Give them the proper name. We, for now, as you've noticed too, are Boo Bills MNY, which had the meaning of a scary ghost for Halloween, but also Boo Bills. So
yeah, I was gonna say we could maybe just keep
double entendre.
Right. Did we have to draft a quarterback? ? We knew 2 were coming off the board before our pick. We were all in, but not enough to get to the second pick.
And I thought this was not to jump in, but I thought this was a really good question. I want to redirect to Scott, if that's okay, because, since they're asking, did we have to draft a QB? My question to Scott would be, how good do you think the 2019 QB class is? But I do want to put in the caveat that, the median fans would have been livid last year if they didn't draft QB after all the maneuvering they did and with a highly, praised first round for draft with quarterback class, if you will. But Scott, what do you think of the 2019 QBs? Very early on, obviously.
I believe I'm trying to think who it is. There's one kid that people seem to like from one of the smaller schools. I forget who it is. I believe, and then I think the other one is the Oregon kid. Is the other one Herbert? Is that his name? I forget. That might not be right. Anyway, there's it's not as deep certainly as last year's team, and I think the unfortunate fact is that I don't know. There's a lot of. I guess the point is, could you have gone into that offseason with a plan to keep your options open? Yes. Could you have gone into that offseason? Could you have gone into that draft with the moves you had made to that point and not taken a quarterback? The answer is probably no. Because the answer would have been, well, we're running Nate Peterman out there. That would have been the answer.
Right. Well, the answer could have been,
McCarron.
They could have signed Derek Anderson as well early in the process. They wouldn't be doing worse than they're doing right now anyway.
Probably not. Yeah. I mean, well, maybe they'd be doing better. Who knows?
Well, dare I say it? May I play the most devil's advocate that they could have done this, especially because they seem to have wanted some sort of ball control offense to go with their defense. That really they had a ball control quarterback on the team under contract that they didn't have to trade to the Cleveland Browns. Now, if you listen to this show at all, I am not a Tyrod Taylor fan, and I did not think that he was a good enough quarterback going forward into the future. But if you wanted the veteran presence and if you wanted one of these guys to be the guy to step in and Josh Allen could learn from him, and then Tyrod Taylor was your guy. And if you kept Tyrod Taylor on the roster, even for one more year, you didn't necessarily have to go and get a quarterback this year. You could have tried to get a quarterback the following year. You had certainly the ammo, and you could have used that ammo to allow other people, you could have let people trade up to your spots again and had multiple picks in the first round in this upcoming year. So there would have been a way around it if you really felt like it. Now, kind of to Scott's point, I mean, that's what they pretty much had been doing, right? They were loading up from even before Brandon Beane got here, that they were going to get a quarterback, and that was in part trading down to get Tre'Davious White and giving up Pat Mahomes, in that particular spot. So, I just there's part of that. That's part of the disconnect too. Is why do we have the raw big arm talent? This guy who is, even the people who liked him had basically said he's undercooked and needs time. Why did they play fast and loose with this quarterback grouping? So I don't know. I'm losing my steam on it.
It's a good question. We could go on.
Very good question, and so I think it's one of those ones that feels like it's a hindsight question, but really somebody in that room, in that draft room, should have been saying, "Do we have to take a quarterback?" And I'm wondering if there was a way, if there must have been some plan B, because if Josh Allen comes off the board earlier, how does that affect them? Do they like any of the other quarterbacks nearly as much? There must have been a backup idea. But
the best NFL draft personnel are the ones who have the foresight to think of things the rest of us only think back to reflect on in hindsight. So you almost hope that they would be asking themselves these questions and have these answers, and maybe we would be questioning them at the time. And then when we're winning Super Bowl after Super Bowl, we're like, oh yeah, that made total sense.
Reza, who has a little blue check mark next to his name because he's special on the Twitter. Who are the Bills? What is happening to the Bills? Where is it happening? When is it happening? And why? And I will add to that, my God, what have I done?
Reza's our most high-profile followers. I think the talking heads, you can always go back to that. Where is the Bills' beautiful house? Where is the Bills' beautiful wife?
And how are the Bills? How do they execute? I
was trying to think of one word that could answer all of these questions. The closest I could come up with was hell. Who are the Bills? Bills are hell. What does happen to the Bill? Hell is happening to the Bills. Where is it happening? It's happening in hell. It doesn't really fit the when part of it though. So it's tough. This is not where we envisioned the process halfway through the 2018 season.
I think there are a fair amount of questions that need to be asked. I think those are all good starts.
Yeah, I feel like that's the enduring philosophical question of this podcast. He's nailed that's the thesis for our class.
This is the famous Russian question that follows on from all of those, which is what is to be done. And
Greg, yes,
that is our question.
Sorry, I thought you were.
No, I am
going up. Okay. On the Facebook.com/BBillsMNY. Scott, Greg wants to know, what, if anything, does the Bills QB issues tell us about the Bagula's management style of the front office and coaching staff?
Say this, as podcast listeners know, I had a very deep conspiracy theory. I mean, Frank had begun a conspiracy theory that wasn't as good, but my conspiracy theory has always been that the Bagulas were the ones who were in love with Allen, and they are been pushing this. We need to get a big arm quarterback because that's conventional knowledge about, as Frank has put it out, that's conventional knowledge because Buffalo is apparently cold, and apparently that requires you have a quarterback who can throw the ball hard, and that is enough to get it done. I don't know that there's a tremendous amount of evidence to support that, but I would say that, you can't, it's kind of, I will say this, it's kind of hard to be half pregnant in terms of being involved with the team. Like, you either get involved with the team and you stay involved with the team, or you don't want to get involved with the team at all. And you really only worry about who is the head coach and who is the GM, and is this working? And then after that, those are your football people, as it were, and you let them make all of the football decisions, and you are responsible for making sure that they are making progress, getting better, winning, whatever you define the goal to be. I don't think it's a good idea to kind of dip your toe in and be like, well, I'm mostly going to let them run it, but I'm also going to make one or two key personnel decisions that I think I need to be involved with. That's probably not a good way to run things. Similarly, if you felt you had to be involved on everything, then at least the hierarchy would be clear, and you would presumably make the effort to stay involved and do the research, stay on top of things, potentially if it wasn't working, you would consider going with some outside help. But I think like it'd be very easy if he, let's say, was involved in the selection of the quarterback or, offensive coordinator or things that would normally be kind of football decisions. It'd be very easy for them to kind of walk away and say, well, I'm sure I made that decision, but all the other decisions were you, so you have to go, and we'll just find another guy who can make this work better. That I'd be a little worried about.
I listened to a very good, it's on the WGR page. There's only one episode of it. It's called Mike Shope in Conversation, but he spoke to Kim Pagula for half an hour, 35 minutes, and they included some questions on this. And it's, what does she do when she's watching the game? How involved is she in the discussion of the game? And so she's like, her answer was, her and her and Terry, talk about it as like fans on Sunday after the game. And then after that, the next day is when they go in and they have a meeting with the front office people and they ask the more technical questions, what about this, what about that, and try and do some evaluation about how the team is doing, sort of evaluation. And I think that there's a value to having your owner invested in some of the decision making, because owners are kind of the fans, right? Like they bought this team because they like the team. Granted, you make plenty of money.
If you spend $1 billion on something, or more than $1 billion on something, you're pretty well. You've got the say to do a lot of what you want to do there. So.
Right. I think you like it on some level, and it's because you have an enjoyment of the sport. And there's not that there's easier ways to make $1 billion, but I think that like Terry Pagula it'd probably be easier for him to, deepen his fracking business as opposed to, trying to his hand at the old sports game. So, I think that they are involved. I don't know that if Scott's right and they were the ones that really wanted to pull the gun on trigger or pull the trigger on Allen, it would have to be your gun.
I thought his name was Josh Trigger. So
exactly.
Something new.
Trigger warning. Then I would hope that McBean could then go to him and say, okay, this is why it's a bad idea to do that. Please listen to us next time. And he would say, I got you. I fell in love with the quarterback. I need to take a step back from that. Right. And you'd be in a place where that would be acceptable because,
yes,
you'd be able to do that. But I don't know, because then I think if you look at the Sabres now, it took them a while and they didn't get the right people the first time. And I think it's still out of a question whether Phil Housley is the exact right coach. But I think that team is heading more in the right direction than the Bills. And they've
the players, they don't have the O'Reillys and Canes and Laners is the designated saviors now. They have a new group with Skinners and Eichels and, Dollins.
Right. And certainly nothing's written in stone for them, but they've owned that team longer than they've owned football. And she talked a lot about how like learning the business of football and learning the people involved. And it's a lot of things. So they certainly seem committed and passionate. They seem like they want to do well. And so that's at least in their favor. There certainly have been sports owners that didn't really give a shit. But let's leave that there, because the answer is what Scott said the first time. And we have lots of podcasts left. Phil, despite the awfulness of Peterman, surely he is a better option than trying to get Anderson up to speed, or do you think the rest of the team just would not accept Peterman playing? To know if local media had any rumblings of this. I think, Phil, that the local media, and I agree with them, is under the impression that it would be mutiny if Nathan Peterman was going to start another football game for this team.
And there have been media members on Twitter who said largely there's a sense they could lose the locker room if they went that direction. So I think they might disagree with Phil's premise and say that maybe he's just not a better option than Anderson. He's only looked good in garbage time in preseason and for part of a second quarter of a snow game against the Colts that you couldn't judge anything on.
Anderson's not really getting up to speed the way that a lot of people are, because he's been in these similar systems and he's been in enough systems that he knows what the deal is, and they can limit the
concepts. He knows the
right.
You know, all he's really learning is the timing and the
what you call it, right? You see, we say bagel 7 here instead of, you know,
croissant 7,
which was in Carolina. Maybe next pastry, but I would still at this point, and they seem to have made that decision that Derek Anderson is the better option this week. If you find yourself debating who gives the Bills a better chance to win in New England, you need to stop yourself from having that conversation and go outside and play, because that is not a life to live, my friend. Josh, and that's not just for Phil, that's just for anybody. And I don't even know that Phil was having that conversation. I'm just saying as a PSA, don't have that conversation. Friends don't let friends have that conversation. Could we potentially, this is Josh, just go on hiatus until Josh Allen can play again, when enduring the pain actually will have a sliver of purpose? I think that is an entirely appropriate fan attitude.
I am excited about the fact that I have my next 2 Sunday afternoons without Bills football.
Yes.
That will make my weekends more enjoyable.
I do think I'm going to try and go out for the first half of the Monday night game, because I need to get out of my house a little. But literally I would go do just about anything. And I have I don't think there's any question that if you want to take a break from Bills football, this week is a great week to take a little break.
Yeah. Why don't you take a little break? Yeah. I think, what was I going to say? The Bills aren't good. And I don't know the rules on forfeiting. I'm pretty sure that's not allowed, because all the people in Las Vegas would go leave horse heads in Roger Goodell's bed. I feel like that would probably not, people would not appreciate that.
Vontae Davis quit. Why can't we?
Mm-hmm.
Derek Anderson wanted to. You could tell.
Yeah, you could tell. Brian, longtime fan. Brian, who or what are the reasons for optimism next season? I haven't seen a full game so far through circumstance, and don't care if I don't see one for the rest of the year. Brian, you and I are simpatico. Yes. Reasons for optimism. I think you could rightly say Tre'Davious White, Matt Milano.
Defense, yeah, Milano you brought up. Edmonds, even though he's not a PFF darling right now, he's shown a lot of the characteristics you wanted. Harrison Phillips ranks as a top 3rd interior tackle for a rookie third round draft pick. So, and I think the biggest reason for optimism, frankly, is the money. They don't have a lot of dead. They've got about under $2.5 million in dead cap space for next year. They've got a lot of money to spend. And if they don't spend it totally stupidly, that's a big if, as Scott's laugh indicates. It's like, what is Kadika Mitchell doing now? Can we stop Langston Walker, Derek Docker?
Are there any Carolina Panthers who are currently not on the Carolina Panthers?
Right. And
Kalen Clay, $35 million guaranteed.
Can we identify one offensive player that's good? Because so far the answer has been probably not.
Well, it goes into Steven's question, which is next, which I have one. The only one I can think of, which I brought up earlier, is
please read. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Steven says losing faith in McDermott being any of their offensive moves showing any promise at all. And the only one I can think of is Dawkins. Cordy Glenn has been pretty good as a left tackle for the Bengals, though not dominant. Whereas Dion has been a better than league average left tackle at a guy who's under a very good cost-controlled contract. And granted, they stumbled into that move. That was not the plan when they drafted him to make him their left tackle. He was supposed to compete at right tackle. But he's stepped in. He's done a good job. He hasn't been super exceptional, but you're not seeing a lot of tackles coming from the quarter, or a lot of sacks or pressures coming from the quarterback's blind side as much. But yeah, Stephen, to go to your point, that's literally the one I can think of.
Yeah, one.
Huzzah. Steven gave us a rundown. Part ways with a veteran quarterback, draft a new raw quarterback, rookie not ready to start, needs to sit behind a veteran. Find a new veteran to replace the one you just let go. Veteran doesn't pan out, start the rookie. Rookie still not ready, scramble to find a third veteran. Didn't we just go through this a few years ago with Fitz, EJ Manuel, Kevin Cobb, and Randy Orton?
Yes, right, doing his RKOs. Yeah, we did. And if you want to go back before that, they did it with Lossman Holcomb after that, when they had Bledsoe on the roster. And then after Bledsoe was let go, they're like, let's bring in the this veteran Holcomb because we're not sure Lossman can do it. And then with the, Lossman Edwards era is when Fitz came into it. And then Fitz became the departed veteran guy. So, yeah, they have replayed this largely since the post-Flutie Johnson era, where they had two quarterbacks who could at least play the sport properly. And then once they gave up on Bledsoe after 2004. This
is what instability at quarterback looks like. This is what it looks like.
You can't learn from your own mistakes if you're not there if you're not allowed to be there long enough to make the same mistake twice.
Right.
Though to be fair, the current regime, I don't know if there's anyone really left in the front office who was around during any of those other things. Now that Brandon is gone, I don't think anyone who has substantial role in these decisions is still left from the Emmanuel Fitz Orton days.
Jim Overdorf, right?
Yeah, Overdorf.
Someone wanted to fire him this week. I saw that, and I was like, that's just silly. Okay, well, let's do this day in Bill's headline, which is always something to look forward to.
Yes, it's going to be an exciting one. We have a very brief prologue on this day in Bill's headlines because the Bills have played the Patriots twice on this day, so I wanted to at least mention those games twice in the last 30 years, that is. One of which was the 1-5 Patriots beating the 5-1 Bills on Monday Night Football in 95. The other, more cheerily, in 1988, the 6-1 Bills beat the 3-4 Pats in a game where Doug Flutie went 5 of 16 for 58 yards for New England in 1988. Despite losing the turnover battle, the Patriots 4-0. And then the last bit of the prologue, I wanted to include this in my trivia. There was a headline in 2003 that said ex-Bills wide receiver Johnson considers joining team as coach. And then the whole 2 sentences after that described to me in the article, don't give me a first name. Is that Tremaine Johnson, Flip Johnson, Charles Johnson? Bills had a lot of Johnson receivers, and I don't know which one made a home in Carolina, even though I researched it because that was part of the article. Anyway, on to the trivia portion of this game and Bill's headlines, and then we'll wrap up with the 2016 game, which will feature a trifecta trivia question to see if you guys can get any of the three aspects. But for now, 2017, Bills beat Pats to signing blank, and Bills beat Pats is deceiving. I mean, yes. Bills jumped the gun and beat the Patriots in signing someone. So the Bills beat Pats to signing blank and reaped benefits in win over Bucks. I will give the hint that this was someone that they signed literally the week before the Bucks and amassed over 100 yards that his first game at his given skill. He is now unemployed, I believe. I will check that. Guy they picked up off the scrap heap, wasn't doing anything, 100-yard day. No, excuse me, he is with the Cowboys right now.
Keyshawn Johnson.
Keyshawn. No, not Key.
No,
Deontay Thompson was the answer. Remember Deontay?
Deontay, yeah, sure, yeah.
All right, 2015. Bills linebacker blank underwhelmed by the food in gloomy, cloudy London. Hint: he has the most British sounding name in Bills history.
English linebacker
Nigel Bradham.
Yep, Nigel Bradham.
You got it, Scott.
What did we call him?
You teed me up.
Frustrating.
All right. 2012, Bills defensive end blank questions teammates' effort. Without singling anyone out, he says it's evident watching film that not everyone played hard every snap. Defensive end, he's with the team, I want to say about a decade, maybe a little longer.
2015?
2012, this was.
2012.
Let's see if I can quickly on my phone pull up his playing career because I don't want to do it on the computer and zool it out. He played for the Bills from 2003 through 2012, 10 seasons.
10 seasons.
32 and a half sacks.
Defensive end.
Aaron Schobel?
Yeah, Aaron was done in after 09.
Earlier.
Yeah, okay.
Boy, I don't know. Ryan Denny?
That was a great guess. It's the other one. It's Chris Kelsey.
Chris Kelsey. The other one.
His and Denny's
the other Ryan Denny.
Yeah.
I feel like he and Ryan's careers mirrored each other.
They
only
did.
Kelsey got the bigger contract, but Denny caught a lot of touchdowns from Brian Mormon, by which I mean two. So, all right.
It's true.
2006, there was not much going on between 7 and 11 worth going into. Blank is king for a day. There's a pun in that headline. The downside for the Bills is they didn't capitalize on this player's catches. 2 of his receptions were followed by turnovers.
Robert Royal.
Robert Royal. Finally, Frank gets to answer correctly with Robert Royal. All right. 2005. This is a slight summary. This was a game where the Bills were 1-4 and destroyed by the Raiders, 31-17. Excuse me, the Bills played the 1-4 Raiders, and the Raiders destroyed them. I think it was 38-17. I wrote this down wrong. The trivia question. There was a back who had played for the Bills for 3 years, who had never had a carry for the team and hadn't had one in 5 seasons dating back to when he was a Jaguar. So what did the Bills decide to do? They handed to him on 4th and 1, and he stopped and what ended up being on the last carry of his career. Can you name that Bill?
Ooh, what year?
2005.
05. I'm graduating law school.
Okay, quickly summarizing, Bills go for it on 4th and 1. Guy hadn't had a carry in 5 years. They give it to him. He gets 0, and he never carried a ball again.
Who did he carry the ball against? Can you tell us that?
Let's see. Well, it was against the Raiders this game. They tried 3rd and 1, and McGahee got the 3rd and 1 call and didn't get it on 3rd and 1. So they handed it off to this guy to try and catch them off guard.
Yeah, I'm not going to get it.
I want to say like Anthony Thomas.
That was a good guess, but it was actually Damon Shelton, the fullback.
Yeah.
That was a tough one.
Right. I didn't realize he. Okay, yes.
Yeah, that was the toughest one left, I think.
Okay.
All right. 2002, Bills cornerback Blank has been selected as the AFC Defensive Player of the Week following his performance in last week's win in Miami.
Cornerback. Is that terrible Terrence McGee?
No, but a good guess.
This would be Clements or Winfield.
Yep. Now, which one? Can you make the correct
I feel like last week it was Winfield, so I'll say Clements.
Scott knows me well. It is indeed Nate
Nasty
Clements.
Nate.
I used Winfield last week. All right. 2001, Jabs, JABS, flying as this quarterback versus this quarterback looms on. So basically I have a battle of 2 Bills quarterbacks going on here in 2001. The Bills are about to play the Chargers. It says the second shot in advance of Sunday's showdown came out of San Diego, where former Bills linebacker Sam Rodgers had this assessment. This is a game we should win by 10 points at least, Rodgers said. I don't think the Bills can sneak one out. You name the 2 Bills quarterbacks butting heads with each other here.
Well, this is before Bledsoe, and
Right.
it is after Flutie Johnson.
Is it after Johnson and Flutie?
That was 99.
99, right?
Was the playoff year, and I don't think they lasted another 2 years together.
No,
I think that
Flutie
they
was
were
gone
done by
then.
then. So I think this is an Alex Van Pelt, and 2002 was like the really bad year, right? They were like 3-13 that year.
No,
That
2001 was the really bad
Oh, okay.
year. And
Okay.
I will say my question was extremely deceptive. This is a former Bills quarterback at the time versus a then current Bills quarterback. Because I think you guys are on the right track in my question.
I see.
So is it Johnson and
It
Flutie
is
on different
Johnson
teams?
Flutie.
Johnson,
That is
Flutie,
correct.
except Flutie's on the Pats at this point.
He's on the
Chargers.
Chargers. He's on the Chargers at this point.
Yep. Bills lost a heartbreaker after a long punt return when Johnson had led them on what seemed like a game-winning drive.
Yeah.
All right, this is guess one of these 2, and good luck. 2000, Blank and Blank revive running game. Spoiler alert, they did not. Narrator says, long-term, they did not. You name
2000.
either of these running backs who were reviving the running game in 2000.
Oh, who was the guy that ended up? No, because
We did Travis Henry like last.
no, yeah, but he's after
Yeah.
this.
Right, Henry was drafted in 01.
Who was
and
the guy
this
that had-
right after Antoine Smith left?
Oh, that's who I was going to guess was Antoine Smith.
So these were the 2 guys who were filling in for Antoine. One went on to have some productive years with the Dolphins and the Patriots, so he was never a feature back. And the other, I think, went to Detroit.
So Danny Woodhead and Gabrielle Union.
Correct.
I'm gonna say
go ahead,
Clayton
Scott.
Kershaw and Mookie Betts.
How's that game going? Was it 2-2 last I saw?
3-2 Red Sox.
All right. Sammy Morris and Sean Bryson.
Sammy Morris and Sean Bryson.
Don't remember those guys
Yes,
whatsoever.
All right, here's the super trivia question, the grand finale.
Okay.
It was a game in 2016. The Bills blow a 17-6 lead with 16 minutes left and lose 28-25 to the Dolphins. So you can name see how many of these three players you can name. Can you name either one, the Bills linebacker who blocked a punt in the second quarter, or two, the Bills safety that accidentally knocked down Ronald Darby and gave Kenny Stills a clear path to the end zone on the game-winning TD, or three, the reason that this safety was in the game was due to an injury, a career-ending injury that happened to the starting Bills safety earlier in that game. That Bills safety would never play again after this game. Can you name any of these three guys, or how many of these three guys can you name? So you're looking for a linebacker that blocked a punt. You're looking for a starting free safety who had a career-ending injury, and you're looking for his substitute who came in and knocked over Ronald Darby like a bowling pin to give Kenny Stills a chance to score the clinching touchdown.
So Aaron Williams was the one who.
Right. There's one of the three. That's three. He got nailed by Landry, and that ended his career.
And then the safety who came in to replace him. Oh, this is gonna bother me because it's right on the tip of my tongue. Was he the Redskin who came over?
Kari Rambo.
That was a good guess, but no, there's a few good guesses you can make here because besides this safety, there's at least two others who occurred to me who it could have been. Rambo was one of four legitimate guesses for this.
All right, I'll say then if it's not Rambo, then it must be John McClane was the other safety.
Right.
And then
since Nakamura Plaza.
Because if it's not Rambo, Plaza, it's the other 80s action hero besides Rambo.
Well, and then the linebacker then would have been John Matrix from Commando.
Very 80s action heavy. Frank, are you going to cede Scott's correct answers here, or any guesses you want to throw out there?
Corey Graham?
That's a good guess, but not it. The linebacker you guys have no chance at, so don't even bother.
All right, yeah, we're good. Give it to us.
Scott got the initials right on the safety. Jonathan Meeks.
Johnny Meeks.
And then the linebacker blocked the punt. Not Matrix, but McCray. Lorente McCray. I don't.
We had a guy named Lorente McCray while we were podcasting.
Yes, he started 13 games. Or no, excuse me, he played 13 games for the Bills, started 3, I believe. Now he plays for the Jaguars, actually played against the Bills in the playoff game. Had 16 tackles for the Bills.
Okay, answer me this honestly. If before this play, I had asked you what you thought of Lorente McCray, would either of you had to do a double take that year and been like, who?
Yes, I had not even remembered remotely his presence. I could not have told you a guy named McCray in 2016 had 16 total tackles and a forced fumble for the Bills and a blocked punt.
That's like one of those fake news sounding things where like they just tell us it happened and we just go, well, I guess it happened because it was on the internet.
I think they faked the footage because I actually watched the highlights of this game.
They can do that now, Paul.
I feel like I have no recollection of it. I watched the McCray block punt, have no recollection of watching that as it happened, and I allegedly would have. I definitely remember the collision at safety that caused and I remember what happened to Aaron Williams too. But yeah, the McCray thing, I think that was faked footage because I had no recollection of that ever happening. And that was this day in Bills headlines, by the way, October 23rd, a bunch of different years.
The Bills play the Patriots on Monday night. They're 13-point underdogs.
I'm glad they're not 3-digit underdogs. I thought this was going to be that first.
Scared away by the 17-point line that we were at the Vikings game. So
yeah.
Last time they played at home on night, I can't believe it was this long ago, 56-10, which I think we watched in Crystal City at my apartment.
We did. There were a bunch of us there. It was sad.
It was sad because that was a Dick Duran team that was kind of okay.
Right. They started like 1-4, and that was the year they had the dreaded Cowboys Monday night loss, deflated us. And then they won 4 in a row to go to 5-4 going into that game. Kevin Everett came by and we gave him a round of applause. And that was the end of the good news for the Bills.
Right. So that's a long time ago. That's also the Andrea Kramer
the
ogling
look
Tom
pitches,
Brady
yes.
at the end of the game in what is one of the most lascivious looks I've ever seen a human being put onto another human being game. But the man had just put up 56 points with his team, so he probably had earned it.
But against the Bills.
True. He also trolled Bills Mafia.
Yeah, he did
this week on the Instagram,
which is so frustrating because we're not going to get vengeance on him. We just have to accept that that's going to be something
he's just a bully. That's all it is. Like
it's definitely some bullying. Yeah,
it's literally someone like Melania Trump. Talk to Tom Brady. Come down
right.
there.
Like that's her initiative. Be nice to the Bills fans.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
That's exactly what her program is about. Helping Bills fans not be bullied by good quarterbacks. Are you going to watch this game? Should we just make plans now, like on the podcast, or what are your hopes?
Yeah, we could always.
I'm not going to ask you who you think's going to win. That's fucking stupid. I don't even know what to ask you about this game, other than.
Did you see who the Pats brought in for a tryout today? By the way,
Jim Kelly,
a former Bill, a little more recent, Colton Schmidt.
But
they bring him in to work out his mouth and be like, "Hey, tell us some things, Colton," because they don't need a punter. That is such gamesmanship. But how is that even allowed to bring in a guy for a workout unless it's monitored by the NFL, who knows the entire Bills?
That is a fairly consistent thing that does happen.
That is true. They do it all the time.
But anyway, I feel like a good question to ask about this game is Nathan Peterman going to play?
Ooh, at all, right? Yeah.
And I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say that they will put, Fred Jackson will come out of retirement and play quarterback before Nathan Peterman goes in this game.
Do you think McCoy will play?
My question was going to be, will McCoy play? And if so, will it be his last game as a Bill?
Yeah, and also Kelvin Benjamin, who may or may not have some value.
Now, I say he doesn't play, but I do think he will survive the trade deadline. He's under contract next year. Money's not a problem for the Bills next year. They plan to win next year, so unless they get a really good offer, I don't think he goes anywhere. But I think
look great. I'm not opposed to trading him if somebody wants him.
I'm not opposed to it, but I just don't want to jettison him off.
I don't want to either. He's been the only really fun thing to watch in the last 2 or 3 years, and he's been excellent. That was a really good trade, and if for nothing else, it's been a joy to watch him as a Bill, and I don't want him to go per se. As great as a running back as Fred Jackson was, you can see that LaShawn McCoy is a superstar in comparison. Mm-hmm. That he's the only legitimate superstar this team has had. But he also hasn't been great this year, and and I don't think he's a difference maker next year. So if we can get anything for him of value,
yes, that'll be the key. But my caveat is it's not like a Marshall Newhouse situation where it's you're willing to give us something for Marshall Newhouse. Okay. Right. I just want to make sure they get something in return. So
yeah, I don't want to see a Marcel Darius trade here where it's just please take him and we'll take anything. Because again, his cap hit is not nearly as bad.
Well, to me, just briefly on the subject of trades,
please.
I think I will say briefly because we're way long at this point. I think
that's okay. We're having fun.
Stop listening, everyone. No, I
they already have. Don't worry.
You don't need to tell us that, Scott. No, I think the issue is it's hard for me to believe that McDermott, again, thinking about the culture thing, how could you sell that to a locker room? Of no, we're really tanking. And they were very put out last year when that became a thing that oh, well, we're tanking because we're trading people. And they're no, we're not. We're going for it. We're adding Kelvin Benjamin. We're doing whatever. And they made the freaking playoffs. So they were right. They were not tanking. They got further than anyone else had. So, but I wonder if the focus, there's this, sometimes it's said that culture eats strategy for lunch. And I get that, but the problem with that is that culture does not have a plan. Culture does not have big picture things in mind. culture doesn't know when to take sacrifices or when to, put things aside that need to be put aside, because culture is not a thing that is steered by a person or a leadership. It's just something that exists, and it can be kind of altered by leadership, but it's not designed to get you anywhere. And I'm concerned that under a McDermott team, there's going to be limits to what they can do in terms of radical restructuring and tanking, because of the investments that he's made in the culture and the type of people he has brought in. And therefore that will limit their flexibility in getting better, which ultimately is the kind of one of the biggest things you need. You need to be able to say, like, this isn't working, we need to change. This guy isn't working, we need to cut him. This guy isn't working, we need to trade him. Like, that's how teams get better. It's not simply as simple as this team needs to have a better culture and work more together. That's very rarely the answer. Done.
Finito. You know what else is done? This podcast. Thank you so much for listening. bbillsmny@gmail.com. I should check that. bbillsmny on Twitter, bbillsmny on Facebook. Search Buffalo Bills maybe next year or Buffalo Bills podcast in your search engine. Add us to your podcatcher. Go to iTunes. Look up maybe next year. Buffalo Bills maybe next year. The second longest running Bills podcast
in history.
In human history, because yes, we are that's it. There is human history, and as of now, we are the second longest running Bills podcast ever in all of human history. Until next time, sometime after, I think we'll just do a quick postmortem, and hopefully no one will be exploded in the Monday night game. And we'll just see what pieces we have left on the ground after that. And then we'll go from there. It'll be time to look towards the third quarter of the season, guys.
Yay.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for enduring and listening. We appreciate it. Have a good night, everyone. My name is Frank.
I'm Scott.
I'm Paul.
Later.